Tariffs paid for by foreign countries will, like in the past, substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax, taking a great financial burden off the people that I love.
I can do anything I want, but I can't charge $1. Great alternatives. Could be more money. We'll take in more money. We're taking in hundreds of billions of dollars. We'll continue to do so.
Tariffs are here to stay. Just as you heard Trump say, there are multiple ways to make it to the same destination. If you're traveling somewhere, you can fly, you can go by car. Similarly, Trump can implement his economic, trade, or foreign policies using various methods, and tariffs are just one of those. However, if you're an investor, you care a lot about how you can benefit in this unpredictable environment. Well, stay tuned. I'm going to tell you how. Recently, the Supreme Court revoked Trump's ability to use tariff authority under the EPA Act. And the EPA Act really only gives the president the ability to regulate commerce in times of national emergency related to foreign threats. And the Supreme Court just did not agree with how Trump was using this act to impose tariffs. Now, the thing is, the Supreme Court said the ability to impose tariffs was with Congress. However, historically, Congress hasn't really imposed tariffs in this type of manner. Since the 1930s, they more often delegated to the president or the executive branch to impose tariffs. And I'll give you just a few examples. Back in 2009, Obama imposed tariffs of around 30% on Chinese tires. In 2024, Biden increased Donald Trump's tariffs on the Chinese electric vehicles from 25% up to 100%. These tariffs were not directly implemented or put out by Congress. Instead, Congress passed wide-ranging laws or acts to protect U.S. businesses and national security, and for the most part, the executive branch implemented that in the way that it saw best fit. So the president has wide-ranging ability to impose tariffs. And these are a few of the reasons why Trump can move around the Supreme Court ruling to still implement his foreign policy objectives. Section 232, the president can impose tariffs for national security. Section 301, the president can impose tariffs due to unfair trade practices. Was actually used by Biden when he increased electric vehicle tariffs on China from 25% to 100%. And he also placed them on semiconductors and steel and aluminum. Section 201 safeguards against imports harming domestic industries. So Obama used these to actually pass tariffs against the Chinese tires I mentioned earlier. Section 122, the max 15% worldwide tariff that's been in the news lately that Trump just implemented. But as we continue our discussion, go ahead and subscribe so you can continue to get valuable insights that look through the noise and the hype. If you see these 4 different sections, the president has plenty of power and ample room to impose tariffs and other things as he sees fit. And it's important to understand that these tariffs are a means to achieve a certain goal. Congress does have the ability to delegate more authority to Trump, take away authority, or change its authorities concerning tariffs. But with the current makeup of Congress, that's highly unlikely at this point in time. Also, let's be clear, tariffs are a tax. Why? Because they don't give Americans the cheapest cost for goods and services. It's one of the curses and benefits of having a strong US dollar. It's beneficial because American consumers can buy goods and services all over the world and they're pretty cheap. But it's a negative for goods and services that are produced inside America, such as US manufacturing, because the cost is high relative to other countries. Apple is one of the biggest US companies in the world. However, no iPhones are actually manufactured in the United States because assembly, production, and workers are all cheaper outside the US. And you can imagine if you were Apple and you could pay workers maybe $5 to $10 to $15 cheaper per hour to do the same work as you could versus a US worker. Where are you going to base your operations? And this was the issue with the previous NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. A lot of the auto companies, whether it was General Motors or Ford, saw that the cost of labor and production was much cheaper in Mexico and moved a lot of their operations down there. So you have two sides on it. On one side, a strong US dollar really helps US consumers because goods are cheap around the world. On the other side of it, manufacturing and certain jobs are too expensive in the US, and it's cheaper to have it done outside the US. And this is why tariffs are one of those things to balance that. Yes, of course, you want to have cheaper goods for your consumers, but you also want to make sure your citizens have jobs. And that's something that's been consistent with other presidents as well. You definitely got to protect your US worker. To fix that imbalance that can happen, one of Trump's main tools has been the tariffs. However, tariffs are just not as simple as blocking a foreign competitor's goods from coming into the US, such as cars or refrigerators. A lot of these tariffs have been on inputs such as aluminum and steel. That actually hurts even domestic companies, because a lot of domestic companies such as Ford source some of their parts and goods from overseas because they're cheaper than getting those parts in the US. Those tariffs on certain input costs actually increase costs for Americans, because those domestic companies such as Ford have to source those parts from more expensive places. Ford is one of those companies, as well as others who have announced how tariffs have increased the price of their cars, which actually became more expensive for US consumers. Now, since we understand the balance and the trade-off of tariffs, and from everything Trump has communicated, he's going to find a way to continue that to achieve his policy goals. How's the smart money benefiting from this? You have to look at the specific tariffs that's happening on products or items that reduce foreign competition in the US. And then those US producers, now having less competition, have more pricing power. Also, the product that they're producing has to have inelastic demand. And inelastic just means people have to pay for it, whether the price goes up or down, they still have to have it, because there's no alternative. One of those things has been aluminum. Trump has placed some steep tariffs on foreign imports of aluminum, which really favors domestic producers of aluminum. Two of those companies that have really benefited from Trump tariffs on aluminum has been Alco and Century, and we've seen the returns just looking at 2025. With Alco having a total return of 42%, Century having a total return of 115% compared to the S&P 500 of 18%. Similar in my previous video, how I talked about the Affordable Care Act and how it benefited certain healthcare companies, you always have to look at when the policy is passed, what company is it going to benefit? A lot of the goods and services that are produced in the United States are not produced by the government. And these are two companies that benefited from Trump's tariffs that allowed them to push out foreign competitors and sell their goods at a higher price. For crypto in particular, tariffs do have the ability to increase inflation. And when inflation happens, the Fed is a little bit more or less likely to reduce rates. And reduced rates is a benefit for crypto. So crypto prices could face a little bit of depression. However, when inflation goes up, holding tokens like Bitcoin are very valuable as a hedge against inflation. And we've even seen this when you look at whether it's the options market or when you look at poly market. Both of them in the coming month of March really showed that there's no expectation that the Fed is going to decrease rates again. We're both showing a greater than 95% chance that the Fed will keep rates the same. So what's the angle? Tariffs are here to stay. Trump still has plenty of tools after the Supreme Court's ruling to implement his economic and foreign policies. To benefit as an investor, focus on the fundamentals. Look for goods, products, and services that will benefit from having less foreign competition and more pricing power in the US market. If you enjoyed this video and felt it had valuable insights, go ahead and subscribe, like, turn on those notifications, and I'll see you next time.